Why United States of America is missing from end times prophecy. Open the book of Revelation. It is wall-to-wall with named players. It describes a final world economy, a final world government, a final world religion. It names a beast. It names kings. It names rivers and cities. It is astonishingly specific about the last days of human history. The most powerful nation in the history of the planet, the one with the reserve currency, the largest military, the cultural reach into every home on Earth, is not in it. How is that possible? There are only three explanations. The first is the most controversial. The second is the most likely. Possibility 1. Babylon. The first explanation. America is not missing at all. It is right there in the text. It is just not called America. It is called something older, something stranger. Mystery Babylon. Babylon the Great. Before you decide that is a stretch, let me read you the description and let you hold it up against the world you actually live in. I am not going to tell you what to conclude. I am going to read you the profile and let you do the matching yourself. Revelation 17, verse 1. Come hither. I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters. Revelation 17, verse 15. The waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. Whatever this is, its reach is the whole human race. Revelation 17, verse 4. Arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold, and precious stones and pearls. A center of dazzling, conspicuous, world-class wealth. Revelation 18, verse 3. The merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. Every nation tangled up with her. Every merchant enriched by her. Revelation 18, verses 12 and 13. Gold and silver and precious stones and of pearls and fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet and all thyine wood and cinnamon and odors and ointments and frankincense and wine and oil and slaves and souls of men. At the top of the list, luxury. At the bottom of the list, after all the luxury, two more items, slaves and souls of men. An economy that trades in luxury at the top and human beings at the bottom. Revelation 18, verses 17 to 19. Every shipmaster and all the company in ships and sailors and as many as trade by sea stood afar off and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, by reason of her costliness. For in 1 hour is she made desolate, a maritime power, a nation of ports, shipmasters and sailors mourning when she falls. Revelation 18, verse 23. For by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. The Greek word translated sorceries is pharmakeia, the root of our English word pharmacy. Whatever she produces, her medicine, her media, her entertainment, her money, it casts a kind of spell. It deceives all nations. Doing the matching. Reserve currency of the world. The financial system every oil deal and trade deal flows through. Some of the largest ports on the planet. An entertainment and technology output that reaches into every nation, shaping how billions of people think and shop and speak. A culture that, more than any other in history, could be said to have dazzled, and perhaps deceived, all nations. I am not going to tell you it is certain. I will tell you the opposite. The Bible gives us a detailed profile, but it does not print a modern address. Rome could fit pieces of it. London could fit pieces of it. A single city inside America, New York, with its ports and its markets and its towers, could fit it. The Vatican has been read as fitting it by Protestant interpreters for 5 centuries. The classical Protestant reading sees Babylon as Rome or the apostate religious system. The classical preterist reading sees Babylon as 1st century Rome itself, judged in 70 AD or shortly after. The futurist mainstream sees a literal rebuilt Babylon in Iraq, or a future global system not yet identified. The American reading is one option among several. You should know that. The profile is specific. The parallels are real. The certainty is not available. How she dies. If this is America, then Revelation does not just predict that it exists. It describes in detail how it dies. The way it dies reads less like ancient poetry and more like a catastrophe simulation. Revelation 18, verse 8. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire. For strong is the Lord God who judgeth her. Not a market crash, not an invasion, not a natural disaster. Divine judgment, and it arrives not over years, but in a single day. The text narrows the window even further. 3 times. 3 times. And watch how this lines up with the number 3 I keep coming back to. 3 different groups cry out the same phrase. Revelation 18, verse 10. In 1 hour is thy judgment come. The kings say it. Revelation 18, verse 17. In 1 hour so great riches is come to naught. The merchants say it. Revelation 18, verse 19. In 1 hour is she made desolate. The shipmasters say it. 1 hour, 1 hour, 1 hour, 60 minutes. The length of a documentary. The length of a morning commute. The most powerful economy on earth goes from running to ruined. A medieval kingdom could not collapse in an hour. News traveled by horse. An industrial economy could not collapse in an hour. It was spread across factories and farms and freight rail. The only kind of economy that could fall in a single hour is the one we built. Digital. Instantaneous. Globally wired together by the same fiber and satellites and real-time markets that make it so powerful. The interconnection that makes it strong is the exact thing that makes it fragile. Pull one thread, and the whole web can go dark before lunch. That is possibility 1. Hold it. We are going down another step. Possibility 2. Declined. The second explanation is quieter. In some ways, it is more disturbing, because it requires no miracle at all. It says America is missing from the end-time story for the most ordinary reason in human history. By the time the final events arrive, America has already declined. Not destroyed by fire, not struck down by God in an hour, just diminished, exhausted, overextended abroad, and divided at home. A former superpower that quietly walked off the world stage the same way every superpower before it did. I know how that sounds to American ears. The dollar has been the world's money your whole life. The military has been the largest your whole life. The idea that all of it could fade feels impossible. Roma Eterna. The Romans had a phrase, Roma Eterna, eternal Rome. It was not a slogan. It was something close to a religious conviction. They believed the gods had ordained their city to last forever. Rome ruled the known world for 5 centuries, built 250,000 miles of road, wrote the law the West still runs on. Then it fell. Not in a day. Through a long, grinding erosion of debt and overreach and division, until the city that was supposed to be eternal was sacked, and the last emperor was simply removed. The Romans did not believe Rome could fall. The British did not believe the empire could dissolve. The Soviets did not believe the Union could break. Every one of them was certain right up until the certainty became impossible. History has one word for that certainty: hubris. Hubris has been the traveling companion of every great power that ever walked off the stage. Ezekiel 38. Here is where Possibility 2 stops being a history lecture and starts touching the text. Ezekiel 38, verse 13. Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish, with all the young lions thereof, shall say unto thee, Art thou come to take a spoil? Hast thou gathered thy company to take a prey? A coalition marches against Israel. The names many evangelical scholars attach to it, Magog as Russia, Persia as Iran, Gomer and Togarmah as Turkey and its allies, are themselves contested in serious scholarship, but the broad reading of a northern coalition invasion of Israel is widely held. When that coalition descends, there is a group described as the merchants of Tarshish, with all the young lions thereof, entities many associate with the great Western maritime powers. What do those powers do in the prophecy when Israel is invaded? They file a complaint. They ask a question. They protest. They do not fight. Feel how strange that is. If America is still the dominant power at that point in the timeline, its silence makes no sense. America has been Israel's primary military ally for decades. The idea that it would watch an invasion and do nothing but issue a strongly worded statement is almost inconceivable, unless it cannot. Unless the military is exhausted, unless the economy is broken, unless the will is gone, shattered by division and war fatigue and debt. Now remember what I asked you to file away during the war. A great power, stronger than anyone on paper, quietly drained from underneath while it believes it is winning. That is the same shape. The prophecy in Ezekiel and the argument about the war are describing the same kind of nation, a giant that can no longer lift its arms. I want to be fair to the alternative reading. Some serious teachers, particularly in the dispensational pre-tribulational tradition, argue that the merchants of Tarshish silence in Ezekiel 38 is because the rapture has already taken the Christian leaders out of the West, and the remaining governments are too weakened to act. The declined superpower reading and the pre-trib reading do not necessarily conflict. They are two ways of explaining the same silence in the text. Possibility 3. The third door. Two explanations on the table. America is Babylon, judged in an hour. Or America is simply spent, faded off the map by the time the final act begins. I promised you a third. I have been holding it the whole time, foreshadowing it, if I am honest, since the very first minute. The third reason America might be missing from the prophecy has nothing to do with bombs, nothing to do with debt, nothing to do with armies or markets or who wins which war. It has to do with something invisible, something that can hollow out a nation and a church and a single human heart from the inside, while every outward thing still looks rich and strong and fine. It is the reason this entire video exists. Stop watching the world. Go to the words Jesus actually said. 4 words. Everyone quotes the same chapter for the end of the world. Matthew 24. The Mount of Olives. The disciples come to Jesus privately and ask him the exact question we have been circling for 30 minutes. Matthew 24, verse 3. Tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of thy coming, and of the end of the world? Everyone races to the dramatic part. wars and rumors of wars, nation against nation, famines and pestilences and earthquakes, the headlines, the stuff that fits in a thumbnail. Notice what Jesus said first. Before any of that, the very first words out of his mouth in answer to the greatest question about the end were not about armies. Matthew 24, verse 4. Take heed that no man deceive you. Read that again. The first instruction Jesus gave about the last days was not watch the news. It was not track the wars. It was watch that you, personally, are not deceived. The opening danger of the end of the age, in the mouth of Jesus himself, is deception. A few verses later, he tells us what the era will feel like from the inside. Matthew 24, verse 12. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. Cold love. Not the world's love. He says the love of many, a word he uses for the crowd inside the household of faith. Love that does not die in a dramatic blaze of rejection. Love that just cools, goes lukewarm, loses its heat so gradually that the person it is happening to never notices the temperature dropping. At the end of a parable about the last days, Jesus asks a question that has haunted me for years. Luke 18, verse 8. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man cometh, shall he find faith on the earth? He does not ask whether he will find a superpower. He does not ask whether he will find armies, or wealth, or even the church buildings still standing. He asks whether he will find faith. Real, warm, living faith. Still burning when he returns. The third door. Go back to our puzzle. Why might America be missing from the end time story? Here is the third answer. Maybe it is not destroyed. Maybe it is not even merely declined. Maybe it is spiritually absent, present in name and empty of power. There is a verse that describes exactly that kind of nation and exactly that kind of church. And Paul says it is the signature of the last days. 2 Timothy 3, verses 1 to 5. This know also, that in the last days perilous times shall come, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. A form of godliness, the shape of it, the vocabulary of it, the buildings and the music and the right words, with the power switched off. That is not an atheist. That is not someone who hates God. That is someone who has the entire outward appearance of faith and none of its actual life. Paul says, that is what the last days look like. A nation could be the most religious country on earth by the numbers. Churches on every corner. God on the money. Faith in every speech. And be utterly absent from the spiritual reality of the end. Present in form. Denying the power. The absence is not geographic. It is spiritual. Jesus wrote a letter about exactly this kind of church. He addressed it by name to the last one. 9. The letter to the last church. Here is the thing almost everyone misses about the 7 letters in Revelation. And the moment you catch it, you will not be able to read the next 3 minutes the way you read everything before them. In the first 3 chapters of Revelation, the risen Jesus dictates letters to 7 churches. This is the only place in all of Scripture where the resurrected Christ speaks in full paragraphs directly to his church. Not parables to a crowd before the cross. Direct mail from heaven to the people who follow him. Whatever he says here, he is saying with full knowledge of how the whole story ends. Here is what should make the hair stand up on your arms. People read these 7 churches different ways. Some say they were 7 real first-century congregations. Some say they map the 7 ages of church history. Some say they describe 7 kinds of church you can find anywhere, in any age, right now. On every single one of those readings, one church is always the last one: Laodicea. Of all 7, Laodicea is the one Jesus has the hardest words for. The diagnosis. Listen to the diagnosis slowly, because every single phrase is a scalpel, and I do not want you to miss where the blade goes in. Revelation 3, verses 15 and 16. I know thy works, that thou art neither cold nor hot. I would thou wert cold or hot. So then, because thou art lukewarm, and neither cold nor hot, I will spew thee out of my mouth. Stop on that first line. Jesus says he would rather this church be cold than what it actually is. He would rather they be all the way off than where they are. Why on earth would he say that? Hold the question, because the answer is the most counterintuitive thing in the entire letter. He tells us in the next breath, so then, because thou art lukewarm. Here is why cold would be better. A person who is cold toward God knows they are cold. They have no illusions. They are easy to reach because they are not pretending. A person who is on fire knows they are on fire. The lukewarm person is the single most dangerous condition of all, because lukewarm has just enough heat in it to blend in with the on-fire crowd on Sunday morning, and just enough cold in it to blend in with the world on Friday night. It is a chameleon. It stands at the line and asks, how close to the edge can I live and still call myself safe? It never feels in danger because it is always blending in with someone. The word spooey in the older translations is more violent. It is the Greek word emio, the root of the English word emetic. It is the word for vomit. You can only vomit out something that is already inside you. He is not talking about outsiders here. He is talking about something he has, in some sense, taken in. Something that has become so lukewarm, it turns his stomach. I want to flag a piece of scholarship here. The older preaching reading of hot, cold, lukewarm was that hot meant zealous for God, cold meant openly far from God, and lukewarm meant the self-deceived middle. The newer geographic reading, defended in a 1958 paper by M.J.S. Rudwick and E.M.B. Green in the Expository Times, and held by Craig Keener and Grant Osborne among modern commentators, anchors the metaphor in the actual water sources around Laodicea. Hot springs at Hierapolis healed, cold streams at Colossae refreshed. Laodicea's piped water arrived lukewarm and made you gag. Both readings point at the same diagnosis: a faith that has gone tepid, a faith that has lost the heat that heals and the cold that refreshes, a faith that no longer does anything. The diagnosis is the same on either reading: the self-description and the truth. Watch what Jesus does next. He tells this church what they say about themselves, and then, in the very next breath, he tells them the truth. The gap between those two sentences is the most important gap in the New Testament for the days we are living in. Revelation 3, verse 17. Because thou sayest, I am rich, and increased with goods, and have need of nothing, and knowest not that thou art wretched, and miserable, and poor, and blind, and naked. I have need of nothing. And you do not know that you are wretched, and miserable, and poor, and blind, and naked. There it is. There is the sign. The sign. The mark of the last generation is not a war. It is not an assassination. It is not the fall of a city in a single hour. The mark of the last generation is a people who are convinced they are fine and have no idea they are in ruins. It is self-deception with the lights on. It is a church and a civilization that says I need nothing while standing there, in Jesus' own words, wretched and blind and naked, and not feeling a thing. That is the sign. That is what I promised you in the first minute. Here is how he sealed it. With a picture you already know, but have never read this way. Matthew 24, verses 37 to 39. But as the days of Noe were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noe entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away. The days of Noah were not war. They were not chaos. They were comfortable, busy with ordinary, pleasant life. The people had no idea. The comfort was the anesthetic. The banquet was the blindfold. Laodicea's wealth is Noah's dinner party. I have need of nothing is the last thing a generation says before the water comes. If lukewarmness is the sign, if it is self-deception, a heart gone cold without noticing, then how does it actually happen? Nobody chooses to go lukewarm. Nobody wakes up and decides to deceive themselves. How does a real, sincere believer end up there without ever seeing it coming? There is a process. It is almost certainly already at work on some of us. Maybe on you. Maybe, if I am honest, on me. The engine of self-deception is hiding in a verse most of us have read 100 times and never once felt the danger in. James 1, verse 22. But be ye doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. That is the whole machine, right there. You hear the truth, a sermon, a verse, a conviction. Then you do nothing with it. James says the result of hearing without doing is not neutral. It is not nothing. It actively deceives you. Notice exactly who it deceives. Not your enemy, not your neighbor, yourself. Here is why that is the most dangerous kind of deception there is. You can be lied to by a stranger. You can be fooled by an enemy. You can be deceived by your own family. When you deceive yourself, there is no one left to warn you, because the liar and the person being lied to are the same person. You sit there, fully convinced you are right with God, while the actual situation is the exact opposite. The conviction itself is the thing holding the blindfold in place, a line to draw. I have to draw a line here and draw it carefully, because I can feel some of you tensing up already. There is a world of difference between the self-deceived person and the person who is honestly struggling. If you are sitting there right now thinking, I keep failing in this, I keep getting tugged back, but I hate it and I keep turning back toward God, hear me? That is not what Jesus is rebuking. That person is chasing. That person is fighting. The condition Jesus is naming is the opposite. It is the person who shows one face on purpose, who has made quiet peace with the gap, who stopped fighting and started managing the appearance. The honest struggler is not lukewarm. The honest struggler is hot and stumbling and getting back up. Do not let the right truth crush the wrong person. How does a heart get to the point where it can hear the truth, real truth, sharp truth, and feel absolutely nothing? Paul gives us the exact word for it. It is a brutal one. 1 Timothy 4, verses 1 and 2. Now the Spirit speaketh expressly, that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils, speaking lies and hypocrisy. having their conscience seared with a hot iron. A seared conscience. Think about what searing actually does to flesh. It kills the nerve. It destroys the ability to feel. A seared conscience is one that has lost the sting. Here is how you would know tonight if it is happening to you. You read something true, something that used to pierce you, used to wreck you, used to put you on your knees. And now you read it and think that is nice, and you have scrolled to the next thing before the sentence even finishes. Then you go live the exact opposite of what you just read, and it does not even register. That is the searing. The truth still arrives. It just stops landing. How do you test yourself when the very instrument you would use to run the test, your own conscience, might be the thing that is compromised? Paul tells the Corinthians, 2 Corinthians 13, verse 5, "Examine yourselves, whether ye be in the faith, prove your own selves." The measuring stick is not how you compare to everyone else online. The measuring stick is the Word of God. Because Jesus said, it is the word He spoke that will judge us in the last day. You do not take your temperature against the room. You take it against the fire. Here is the fire. Here is the standard. Here is how to know. Tonight, before you close this video, whether you are warm or whether you are cooling without feeling it. The most dangerous thing about the lukewarm condition is that the person inside it cannot detect it. The thermometer is broken. The nerve is seared. The self-assessment says, I am fine, while the divine diagnosis says, wretched, miserable, poor, blind, naked. There are indicators, 5 of them, each one drawn from the passages we have already walked through. Here is what to do with them. Do not evaluate them the way you evaluate a sermon. Do not nod and agree and file them. Apply them tonight to yourself. Because James already told you what happens when you hear without doing. You deceive yourself. The self-deception is the condition this entire video has been diagnosing. Indicator 1. Heard and did nothing. The first indicator. You heard truth this week and did nothing with it. James 1:22. But be ye doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. You have been watching this video. You have heard the Babylon profile. You have heard the decline argument. You have heard the Laodicean diagnosis. You have felt the conviction, the moment in the last hour where something landed a little too close. The test is not whether you agreed, it is whether you do something with it before the conviction fades. The conviction is fading. Right now, while you are watching this sentence, the half-life of conviction without action is measured in hours, not days. By tomorrow morning, the sharpness of what you felt tonight will have dulled. By the weekend, you will have consumed enough content to bury it under new information. By next Sunday, you will sit in a service and hear another truth, and nod, and agree, and file it. And the engine of self-deception will have completed another cycle. Hearing without doing. Again, the test is not whether this video moved you. The test is whether this video moves your feet. Tomorrow, into the Word, into prayer, into the action the conviction is calling for right now, while the calling is still loud enough to hear. Indicator 2. The gap. The second indicator, your private life does not match your public confession. The gap between Sunday and Friday is the thermometer. The width of the gap is the temperature reading. The gap does not feel like a gap from the inside. It feels like balance, like wisdom, like being in the world, but not of it. The lukewarm person has rebranded the gap as maturity, and the rebranding is the searing. Think about what you watched this week, what you scrolled through, what you lingered on, what you said in private that you would never say at church, what you tolerated in your own thought life that you would condemn in someone else's. The gap between the public version and the private version is the thermometer. The thermometer does not lie, even when the conscience has stopped registering the reading. Indicator 3. The dying nerve, the third indicator. Conviction has stopped producing discomfort. There are verses that used to pierce you, passages that used to put you on your knees, sermons that used to wreck you for days, where you would drive home in silence because the word had cut so deep you could not make small talk. Now you hear those same passages and think, that is good, and move on. The truth still arrives. It just stops landing. The sword is still sharp. The skin has thickened. The thickening feels like growth, when what it actually is callous. Answer this honestly. Not the version you would post, not the cleaned-up answer, the real one. When was the last time a verse put you on your knees? Not made you nod, not made you agree, put you on your knees. If you cannot remember, that is the indicator. The nerve may be dying. The dying feels like peace. Indicator 4. Against the fire, not the room. The fourth indicator. You compare yourself to the culture instead of to Christ. 2 Corinthians 13:5. Examine yourselves, whether ye be in the faith. Prove your own selves, not against the room, against the fire. The cultural comparison is the most dangerous thermometer available, because the culture is freezing. The culture has normalized what the Bible calls sin, and celebrated what the Bible calls foolishness, and mocked what the Bible calls holiness. Measuring yourself against a freezing room will always make you feel warm enough. The person who watches the world and says, "At least I am not that far gone," has chosen the wrong standard. The standard is not the culture. The standard is not your small group. The standard is not the other Christians in your feed. The standard is the Word, and the Word is fire. Against fire, lukewarm is immediately obvious, because lukewarm cannot stand next to fire and pretend to be the same temperature. The comparison exposes the gap, which is why most lukewarm believers avoid the comparison. Not consciously, not deliberately, but through the slow drift of reading less, praying less, examining less. The thermometer gets put away. The temperature drops without being measured. The fifth indicator, I have need of nothing, feels true. This is the final stage, the completed condition, the Laodicean self-assessment at full maturity. When comfort feels like blessing, when financial stability feels like God's favor, when the absence of crisis feels like the presence of God, when the schedule is full and the bank account is healthy, and the marriage is functional, and the kids are in a good school, and the church attendance is regular, and the honest answer to how is your walk with God is fine. And the fine is not a lie. It genuinely feels fine. Here is what Jesus says about the person for whom fine is the honest answer. Revelation 3:17. Because thou sayest, I am rich, and increased with goods, and have need of nothing, and knowest not that thou art wretched, and miserable, and poor, and blind, and naked. The gap between I have need of nothing and wretched, miserable, poor, blind, naked is total. 5 words of self-assessment versus 5 words of divine diagnosis. The person inside the gap cannot see it, because the blindness is the condition. The condition feels like 20/20 vision. 5 indicators, each one measurable, each one personal, each one applicable tonight. If the diagnosis is this severe, if the lukewarm condition is this advanced, this invisible, this self-reinforcing, is there a way out? Or is the Laodicean church simply doomed to be vomited out? The answer is 3 verses later, in the same letter. The answer should change how every viewer understands the severity and the mercy of God, because the mercy is hidden inside the same paragraph as the judgment. Most people studying the Laodicean letter never reach the detail we are about to walk into. Most sermons on Laodicea stop at the diagnosis. They stop at, "I will spew thee out of my mouth." They stop at wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. The listener walks away, convicted, but paralyzed, knowing they might be lukewarm, but having no path forward. The letter does not stop at the diagnosis. 3 verses later, 3 verses after the most devastating spiritual assessment in the New Testament, Jesus gives the most intimate invitation in the New Testament. The proximity of the diagnosis to the invitation is the detail that should change everything. Revelation 3:20. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and open the door, I will come into him and will sup with him and he with me. The verse contains 5 details. Each one is a lifeline for the person who just realized they might be inside the lukewarm condition. Detail 1. Outside his own church. I stand at the door. Jesus is standing outside his own church. Not inside leading. Not on the platform preaching. Not in the midst of the congregation. Outside. The Laodicean church did not expel Jesus in a dramatic confrontation. Nobody voted him out. Nobody nailed a proclamation to the door. The church drifted, slowly, comfortably. The temperature dropped degree by degree. The programs continued. The music played. The attendance held. Everything looked fine from the inside. Somewhere in the gradual cooling, Jesus ended up on the wrong side of the door. The church inside never noticed, because the form of godliness was still intact. The building was still open. The services still ran on time. The only thing missing was the presence. The presence had been gone so long that nobody remembered what it felt like when it was there. Detail 2. Patient, repeated, and knock. Not a battering ram, not a forced entry, not the wrath the diagnosis might have led you to expect. A knock. Patient. Repeated. The knock of someone who will not force the door, but will not stop asking. Jesus has not given up on the lukewarm church. The diagnosis is devastating. The diagnosis is not the final word. The knock is the final word. The knock means the door can still be opened. Think about how long he has been knocking. How many sermons has he used as knocks? How many convictions? How many moments where something stirred in you? A verse that landed. A prayer that broke through. A quiet voice at 2 a.m. saying, "Come back." And you heard it, and rolled over, and went back to sleep. Each one was a knock. He is still there, still knocking. The patience of the knock is the mercy of the verse. Detail 3. Any man, if any man hear. Not if the whole church repents. Not if the denomination reforms. Not if the nation turns around. If any single person. The invitation is individual, one person at a time. The Laodicean condition may describe the church as a whole. The Laodicean cure is offered to the person. This distinction should change how every viewer processes the three possibilities we covered for America. Because the nation's trajectory does not determine your outcome. America may be Babylon, judged in an hour by fire. America may be the declining superpower, exhausted, divided, filing protests instead of sending carrier groups. America may be spiritually hollow, a form of godliness coast to coast with the power switched off. None of those national outcomes changes the offer in Revelation 3:20. The door is still there. The knock is still happening. If any man here means the rescue is available to the individual, even when the nation has gone lukewarm from sea to shining sea. Detail 4. He enters you. I will come into him. The direction is reversed from what most people expect. The viewer expects the invitation to say, I will let you into heaven. Jesus says, I will come into you. The direction is not outward, it is inward. Jesus entering the space the viewer occupies. Not a distant theological transaction, a personal entry into your room, into your marriage, into the space where the seared conscience lives and the lukewarm temperature has settled. The cure is not relocation. The cure is habitation. He enters where you are. His presence is the fire that raises the temperature. Detail 5. The table for two, and will sup with him, and he with me. The Greek word for soup is deipneo, the evening meal, the main meal of the day, the intimate dinner, not a banquet hall, not a conference, a table for two, face to face, unhurried, personal. The meal is the cure. The cure for lukewarmness is not a better program, not a louder worship service, not a more convicting sermon series, not a new accountability partner. The cure is intimacy with Christ. The very thing the lukewarm church lost, personal, face-to-face, unhurried time in the presence of Jesus, is the thing Jesus is offering to restore. The lukewarm condition was produced by distance, the slow drift, the gradual cooling, the programs replacing the presence, the activity replacing the intimacy. The cure is the reversal of the distance. Jesus entering the room, sitting at the table, restoring the closeness that the lukewarmness destroyed. The lock on the inside. The door is not sealed from the outside. It was locked from the inside by the church that said, I have need of nothing. The key is not a theological formula. The key is hearing the knock and opening the door. The simplest action in the Christian life. The hardest one for the person who has convinced themselves the door is already open when it has been shut for years. The open door is just the invitation. The response, what every viewer should do before the conviction fades and the temperature settles back to where it was, has to happen now, not tomorrow, not next Sunday, now, while the knock is still audible.